Okay, and then let me share my screen. Maybe where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Two. Okay. All right. So thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Daniel Ware and I'm the genealogy librarian here at the Kentucky Historical Society. And today my presentation is going to be this genealogy workshop, alternate paths. Mainly it's dealing with like if you can't find a birth record or a death record specifically, what are some other documents or types of records that you might look to kind of get you past, if you're trying to figure out when somebody, an ancestor was born or when they died, or any other kind of information you might find from either of those records, typically. Okay, and so some things I'm going to talk about today are going to be things such as that you might find information in like newspapers, church records, family histories. You might also look at family trees and family sheets that people put together. Here at KHS, we do have surname files that people can look at that'll have a lot of different kind of information. There's also census records and military records. Also, you could potentially find something maybe in cemetery records or Bible, family Bibles or Bible records, naturalization records, immigration lists, marriage records, wills, obituaries, and then potentially funeral records. Okay, so you're having trouble finding getting tongue-tied. Having trouble finding a birth or death record. Sometimes, an ancestor, they didn't leave a birth or death record, or, there may have been a record, but unfortunately, there's been, disasters and, civil war and things like that may have occurred, that, things got destroyed or lost. That does happen quite a lot. There's a lot of courthouses that have burned down or have flooded, or or something has happened. So what should you do if you can't find a birth or death record for your ancestor? Well, what we're going to talk about today, take an alternate path. And many records and documents, they can provide the same kind of information sometimes that you might find in a birth or death record. And they may help you get past that brick wall that you're stuck behind due to the missing birth or death record. And so then today, like I've already said, we're going to basically learn about some of these alternate records and documents and paths. Okay. All right. So first thing I'm going to talk about, there's newspapers. They're kind of, some of the stuff you find in them can be kind of similar to an obituary. And a lot of times I'll find an obituary in a old newspaper, but you may also just find just an article about a person. And it could provide information that's replacing the missing death or birth record. I mean, and obviously a lot of these, I want to forewarn that, you may not necessarily, like, I wouldn't say that, these other records should be the only thing you check as far as missing birth and death records. Like they're not, I guess they're not like the full replacement of them, but they can be good alternatives in certain instances. They'll at least provide, these other things can provide you with certain information that would lead you to look in other places. But like, newspapers, you might learn just things about your ancestor and their life. There may be a mentioning of a birth or a death location, along with maybe how old they were when they died. You could also maybe find other individuals connected to your ancestor's life, such as neighbors or family or friends, and that can help you learn more about your ancestor as well. And then there's also church records. These, you may learn your ancestor's birth rate. Kind of depends on the specific church record and the location. Um, you might at least get an estimation of an ancestor's birth based on a baptismal record, because I have seen some of those where, it might show a particular year and then there'll be a date and then the child was getting baptized. And, a lot of times, especially if it was as children, they probably weren't, it probably wasn't too far off from when they were born, from when they got baptized, depending on I guess, the denomination of the church. So you could look to that and kind of have a guesstimate at, oh, they may have been born like a month before, or so many days before. You also could learn based on church records where your ancestor may have gone to church, and then in turn learn about your ancestor's family who might have attended that church as well. And, depending on the church record and the church and everything like that, there may be information about your ancestor's marriage as well. And like cemetery records, which I'll get into in a few minutes, you may learn a death date or a burial location and learn of the age of your ancestor at the time of death. And other things, you might learn parents' names, especially in baptismal records and things like that. So you can kind of learn more about, where your ancestor came from and, and things like that. And then here's an example of a baptismal records for Daviess County. It's for St. Lawrence baptismal records in Knoxville. And then on the right hand side is a picture of an example of, a listing of that priest or the individual that did the baptizing. He recorded, firsthand who he baptized on the date. And like in this example, it was, like October 22nd, 1854, they baptized Mary Catherine, who was born June 29th, 1851. And, so, you'll get that, you might get that kind of information. It'll state potentially when they were actually born. And also, and well, like in this case, that was, 3 years ago, but still, if they state like they were born on this date, you at least got a birth date. And then, they might talk about, Richard Moses, daughter of son of Richard, so they usually will tell you like who they're the son or daughter of potentially. So that's another resource that you can use if you can't find a birth record particularly. Okay, and then there's also family histories that you can look at. These are usually donated books that were written about certain families and useful for looking for family and don't know where to start. And usually I'll team this up with looking at surname files, because you can find a lot of background information, such as like where a family came from, a line of descendants, and even where they migrated to or from. And so, you might learn, parents' names, or you may get some kind of a birth date or a death date. And, and especially in things like this, I would still corroborate it with like an actual like record. But, I have gone and looked at family histories to get, ideas of when a particular ancestor may have lived and where they lived and things like that. So you can use these to at least get an idea, get a ballpark, figure, I guess, as far as that kind of information. And also like, like I've kind of saying, you may find birth or death information about your ancestor, such as a birth year, birthplace, the names of parents, their age at death, their death location. And then you can also, if you find these locations in a particular time frame, then you can go and look at other records, such as like census records or things like that, to see if you can find them in that time and place. But yeah, so like, you can at least get ideas for, stuff you may have normally found on a birth or a death record. And here's just a kind of a picture of like where our family histories are and kind of what they look like, just to kind of give you an example. And then, like I was talking about before, there's also family trees or family group sheets. They're kind of similar to family histories because they're usually put together, by another individual, and then they're donated to us, or, people at home will put these together. And, we do have some of these that are in our surname files, and they can provide birth and death information for some ancestors. You might learn a birth date and a death date. You might, by looking at these dates, figure out the ancestor's age at the time of death. And then, typically you can see who like parents and siblings are based on the charts. Excuse me. And also sometimes, depending on the family tree or chart, there may be a little more information, a little more detail added, like such as, uh, who somebody married, maybe an occupation or something like that. I have seen before where people have written like little tiny notes on there, and so provides a little more detail for you. And here's just a couple of examples of some family trees. Like on the right, I think this one was from a part of the Jesse James and his family. But like there's a little section that says they were married by her uncle, Reverend William James, at her sister's house in, I can't quite read that. It's in Missouri, and was his first cousin. That was for Jesse Woodson James. So sometimes, depending, you might get a little tidbit of information that you can add, to your information. And then here's, like here on the left is a family group sheet or a group record. And, sometimes they can provide some details of information that you may not get based on a birth or death record, such as, where that, a person's residence was, or, who they married, who, their parents or, siblings or children were. And potentially a birth or a death date itself. Now, I do want to forewarn, kind of like the family histories, these are obviously put together by individuals, and they don't necessarily always have record documentation to back up some of these pieces of information. So I would definitely, like, if you look at these types of documents, I would double check with actual like records, just to make sure people were where they were or where they were stated to be at, and if they were born or died on a particular date. Because I have looked at things, and I'll look at one place and they might have somebody was born in this year, and then I look in another place and somebody may have that same person being born, like 5 years later or something. So it's always good to double check with actual records and documentation as far as these kind of things go. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep. It's always good to use them as a jumping off point. Yep, that is correct. And like, I mean, like I'll be honest, like I'll look at some of this kind of stuff as well when I'm researching, but I use it as a jumping off point, or to give me ideas of, hey, they may have been in this county or in this town, or, they may have been here at this particular time and place. So then I'll go and look at like census records or, other types of records to make sure that they were there, or, they're that age, or they're that particular. Yeah. So it at least gives you names and places and time periods to think about when you are researching. And then, like I was talking about earlier, like we do have surname files. And most of those are just donated materials that I believe we've received since 1836. And there are different types of materials in each folder. So when you are looking at surname files, you do want to remember sometimes that, there might be the same surname, but in, different folders, but the surname may be spelled differently. And then sometimes we do have some folders where we'll have the surname file and it'll be spelled one particular way, but we'll have information about that surname, even if it's spelled differently. So, I would double check if there's multiple spellings. I would double check all the surname files, because you never know, you might find, copies of like Bible records or articles about a person or an ancestor, and it might provide you with birth or death information. Because you might find birth or death information about your ancestor. May find a newspaper article or just some kind of article about your ancestor or family that provides background information. You could find documents that state their birthplace or their birth date, their death date, burial information potentially, and other information about family. And, especially when it comes to certain information you might find in here, once again, I would still double check actual records, because most of the things that are in the surname files are like photocopies of correspondences from people, or their like articles, or their copies from a family history or a family Bible or something like that. And so, you also want to double check and corroborate with other records as well. And then here's a couple of pictures to kind of show you what, like if you came into KHS and wanted to look at surname files, this is kind of the setting. On the left is kind of when you walk back into like our open stacks area. And they're in like the filing cabinets there in the center there. And then on the right is a example of one of the drawers. So like that drawer is for any surnames that are between Gibbs and Gifford. So, if you have a family that has either of those last names or something that's alphabetically in between, then there's potential that you might have a folder in there. And then also some family surname files, we have multiple folders for. So it might be like Gibbs 1, Gibbs 2, Gibbs 3. But then some we may just have one folder for. It just kind of depends on the family and the information that's been passed on to us. There's also census records, which I've mentioned a couple of times here now in passing. Here you could potentially learn some key birth information for your ancestor, such as their age, or at least a general, approximation of their age. Because I'm sure if you've ever looked at any census records, I've looked at them, and, one census will have somebody being, like 25, and then the next census they're still 25. It's like the aging on that kind of differs. I believe it was 1790 was the first census, because we do have here in our reference section, we do have the censuses from 1790 to 1850 of just Kentucky, and it's indexes, and you'll see who's listed. And now from what I've looked at on the 1790 census, I think it's based on I think it's based on 1789 tax lists. So I know it's like technically Kentucky wasn't its own state in 1790, but we do have 1790 censuses that do place people in like the counties that would become part of Kentucky. But yeah, as far as I could tell, I think they're based off of like the previous year's tax lists. Yeah, you're welcome. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, like the age thing, yeah, I mean, you can at least get an idea of like how old your ancestor may have been at that time, and you can kind of do some math. And because I've done that before, where I'll see, oh, according to this, they're 40, to the 1860 census. So then I'm like, okay, so they were roughly born around, 1820, give or take. And sometimes I haven't seen necessarily, I guess depending on the census and where you look, like you might find a more specific birth location, but I know a lot of them, they'll at least will typically give like the state that they were born in. Now I have seen, well, I've seen on like Ancestry, like, but I think it's more for where they're actually at when they're taking the census. But sometimes they'll give like a town or a city, but I'm not necessarily sure if they give like a specific birth like city, but you might at least get an idea of what state they may have come from. Um, and also, you might learn who your ancestors' parents were, especially if they were, if it's 1850, if it's census for 1850 and later, it'll at least list the whole household. So like if your ancestor was, like 10 in 1850, and they're a child, so then they should hopefully be listed in a household. And, you could potentially assume that, the head of the household is the father or the mother. Oh, okay. Yeah. I was going to say, as far as, yeah, your Kentucky ancestor was born in Kentucky in 1836. And then, okay, so she was already married and living in another state. I mean, do you know what kind of time frame that was? Like when she was married and living in another state? Okay, well, while you're doing, oh, okay, okay. Um, I was gonna say, if you know who she married and if they were in Kentucky, um, you could, I mean, potentially look up like the husband maybe, or like the father maybe, like in like census records from the time. And then, especially if you're looking just at the like in our reference section, like I was saying. Okay, I got you. Okay. Okay, I got you. Um, well, you might still be able, if you know like the father's name, you might be able to like look in like an 1830 census, like especially if it's just like the overall like I was saying, like where we have in our reference section, we've got like just more of like the index that lists everybody that was living in the state of Kentucky. Uh and it will give like what the county was that they were living in. So I mean, you could potentially do that. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, as far as like not knowing what county, that would be the best option. But yeah, you'd have to, because I have had to do that before, where I've kind of dug around for like a parent to just see where they were at a specific time when I'm looking for like the child of and sometimes, I mean, even that's kind of tricky. But that would be one of the best bets, without like knowing like a general idea of, maybe potential places that they may have been. I was gonna say, yeah, if you're able to ever come in here, we do have people, yeah, working here that can like help direct you and give you ideas and things like that, and that can help you out, things like that. Now, as far as if you just came in, you'd just be paying like an $8 admission fee to just get into the whole building. And then you'd potentially pay for photocopies or something, but then that would be it. Oh, okay, I got you. Um, I'll I'll communicate with you after this presentation, because we do have like request forms that people can fill out and mail us the research fee and things like that, and we can do research and then like send it to you. And I'll have like my contact information at the end of the presentation, so we can discuss that after this, if that's okay. You're welcome. All right. So now, anyways, so census records basically get us, you might be able to find, parents or other relative, siblings or anybody that was living in the household, and get an idea of maybe where your ancestor was born, or, how old they may have, or what year they were born. And then here's just a couple of pictures, just showing an example of some of the, census records you might see, as far as like what we've got, like the transcribed, like book copies. We do also have copies of original census records on microfilm as well. I typically, if I'm looking at census records, though, I usually first try to look in like these transcribed book copies, just because there will be a quick and easy index to look at. So you can just look specifically for a name, because the original, or the copies of the originals that are on microfilm, as far as I know, they don't really have an index, or if it is, it's hard to get to, and you have to just kind of search and search and search until you find the name you're looking for, and you may not even necessarily find that name. So I usually look at the book copies first and foremost, just to see if I can find them. But yeah, so like here on the right, there's like the Tyler family, and you'll get like an age, and and sometimes, depending on the record, you might get some detail and you might not, but you'll get like, age, and the head of household, what their occupation was, and you know talking about showing like the state that they were born in. So yeah, a lot of times you'll probably just get the state, but that's at least gives you an idea of where to look if you don't even know like the state necessarily. Okay, and then we've got, also kind of want to talk about military records as well, because, depending on the military record, you might at least get an idea of like what their age, you might learn what their age is at that time. And then you, once again, kind of like census records, you can kind of do some math and figure out, okay, well, they were born in this year potentially. Some may actually give full birth dates. I'm not entirely sure. From what I've seen, like usually it's just how old they are at that time, like if they're signing up for service or something like that. You might find what their birthplace was. At the very least, usually, there'll be a name of a place, I guess, that of their current residence. And so there's a chance that that's where they were born, or you might at least figure out, like, learn about that location and figure out, oh, hey, they moved there at this certain point. You might learn the names of parents, depending on, because sometimes some records will have like a point of contact kind of person, somebody that the military can contact, and it may be a mother or maybe a parent of some sort or a relative. And so you can at least maybe learn more about their family based on that as well. And then there are cemetery records. Sometimes you might learn their birth date, because especially if it's a lot of the cemetery records we have are like the transcribed book copies that people went and did inventories of different cemeteries around the different counties. And so, a lot of times, depending on the cemetery and the person that recorded it, there might be, a lot of information. It might say like they were the son of this person, or, you'll at least hopefully get like a birth date. And obviously, well, not obviously, because sometimes, the cemetery, the tombstones get in bad condition or they don't get one at all, unfortunately. But, typically, you should be able to learn like the date of death. And then you could also learn what their age was at the time of death based on their birth and death dates, potentially. And, also like I was mentioning before, like, especially in like the book listings, you might learn who their parents were, or, even if you just go to the actual cemetery, a lot of times, families will bury family members close to each other, especially if it's like, parents and children, or, I know even like my own family, like I've gone to, some of the cemeteries where I have family buried, and, like I'll have like my grandparents buried together, and then, one of my uncles, might be nearby, or, a cousin of, that side of the family. So, a lot of times if you just even go to the cemetery and look, you might see people buried near each other that have the same surname, and you can kind of get an idea that they're, family. And, that might not be something you would have known if, since you can't find a birth or a death record that might have stated who the parents were, or, in the case of a death record, a potential child that was recording, providing the information for their parent in the death record, and things like that. And then here's an example of like the transcribed book copy that I was talking about. Like this is for Highland Memorial Cemetery in Lexington. Now, like in this case, it's more of like just a list of names. And then I believe then that's the date of their death in the middle left column. And then there's a column for who the undertaker was. So sometimes you might also just learn other information of like, who the undertaker was, who took care of the body, who, other information that, might prove useful. And then also sometimes you'll get like a location of where that actual burial is, what the lot is and everything in the cemetery. So if you did want to go and like actually physically see where that was, you could, potentially go there and look. And there's also Bible records. Here a lot of times, you can find some sort of birth, marriage, or death record of some sort. If you can't find your birth or death record for your ancestor, the family Bible may include information about your ancestors that these records may have had. And you may learn the age of your ancestor at the time of their death. You may learn like who your ancestors' parents were, or other key information like that you may have not gotten since you don't have their birth or death record. Now I will forewarn again that Bible records, like usually, I mean, they're pretty good as far as like providing information, but I mean, I typically see them kind of similar to like family histories where, yeah, I'm not trying to discredit the person that wrote this information into their family Bible, but this information is just, basically handwritten by a person into a book based on what they know or what they've been told, and, they're not necessarily using like actual like documentation. And sometimes, especially if it's somebody that put together the record, more closer to the time that's being recorded. I mean, you could probably look at it a little more better because, I mean, if they're witnessing the birth of like a grandchild and then they turn around and, the next day they write it in the Bible, it's probably pretty accurate. But, a lot of this stuff, you still want to double check, with other documents and records just to make sure, like if you see a marriage, somebody getting married, then you want to go and actually find the actual marriage record just to see if the time frame and everything is correct. But, like these other records or documents, these can at least give you, birth information or death information you may have not normally have found, and give you ideas and point you in certain directions that you might not have thought of going to. You'll get certain names or certain, maybe places or locations or dates that you can go and look around for more information on. And then here's an example of a couple of family records from a family Bible. So like on the left side are some marriages or a marriage that happened in 1778, I believe, December 11th. And so like here you've got names of the two people that got married and then a date. So you can like try to look up more information about those two individuals. And you can go double check and see if you can find now that early of a marriage record, or of a marriage, it might be a little tricky to find certain records, because a lot of like the birth records and the vital statistic records, like they weren't really regularly recorded until between 1852, and then it went on and off again between then and 1910. Now marriage records are a little bit easier because there's at least like bonds and certain things that you might be able to find pre 1852, but a lot of birth and death records, like it can be a little trickier as far as those. So that may be another reason why you don't have a birth or death record is, it was too early, and, there may not be a lot of straightforward birth and death records, that early as far as Kentucky goes. But, you might find a Bible record and learn about a death or a birth, or, newspaper article or an obituary or something like that. And so like on the left or the right side is some births. And so you can get some names and some dates and things like that, that you could potentially look out for. And then you could potentially, you might be able to learn something from naturalization records, potentially. You might learn about your ancestors' birthplace, especially, if they came from another country. You may learn like that they came from Ireland, or they came from, England, or, or Portugal, or, wherever, at least, I don't know how detailed you would get on some of these, but, if you at least know like the original country that they came from, then you might at least give you an idea of, some information you might not have been able to find if since you didn't have like a birth or a death record, and things like that. And you might learn just some other vital information about, the birth of your ancestor as well, such as, where they came from, or, or, somehow learn, about other family or something like that. And there's also immigration lists, and like the naturalization records, you may learn crucial birth information about your ancestor. You could learn potentially your ancestor's country of nativity. It may tell you the age of your ancestor at the time of their arrival, potentially. So you could once again do some math and, figure out a potential birth date based on that. And especially if it was like a family or a group that were coming at the same time, you might learn, who the parents were, or who siblings were, based on, the fact that there's this whole group of, people coming at the same time from the same place, and they have the same name or same surname. So that could also be something you might want to look at as well. And then like, here's a couple pictures like we have in our reference section. We do have some passenger and immigration lists and indexes and things like that, that people have came and looked at. that can also, give you an idea of a time frame of when they arrived, in the United States, or, where they came from and things like that. So, they may be able to provide you something as well. Okay. And then marriage records, like I was kind of already talking about, like they were typically kept between 1852 and 1910, depending on the years. You do find some pre 1852, and then like there's like bonds, and which would basically be like if the father of like the bride, or or one of the male figures that's related to the bridal party, would basically put forward some kind of monetary amount of, and basically it was a guarantee that the marriage would happen, from what I understand. And then there's also registers and certificates. um, Marriage records, they may, you might learn like the ages of your ancestors when they were getting married. And then once again, you can do math and, maybe figure out an approximate birth date. You might learn the birthplace of your ancestor, or at least where they were living at the time of marriage. And then, you could potentially look at that being the potential birthplace. You could also learn other key birth information, such as the names of parents, or, if there's certain witnesses that might be relatives of some sort. And here's an example of a marriage record for you. Okay, and wills, I look at wills a lot, especially when trying to learn information about a person when I'm researching, and I'm needing to find key information and I can't find a death record, or things like that. Because you could potentially learn what their age was at the time of their death. You might see what their death location was, at least what the county was, because a lot of them will say, that they were John Smith of, Fayette County, and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times, the information I am trying to find would be like parents' names or siblings or children. So you can gain that kind of information as well. So that will help, that can help you find certain people, or certain, certain information, as far as like at least death information, like that you normally would on a death record. And then here is an example of a will from one of our transcribed book copies. And, a lot of these, you can find pretty good information. Like you'll learn, if they were, who, a spouse was, or siblings, potentially you might learn what caused their death. A lot of times, sometimes they'll mention that as well. And so, yeah, this is stuff you may not, if you don't have a death record, you may not learn this kind of stuff about your ancestor. And then obituaries, you can, you can use them, or some of the information, in the place of a death record. You might, hopefully you can learn a death date. Usually they'll state, or they'll at least give a date of when they're having like a funeral service or something. Usually they'll say at least give you a day that they passed, but sometimes if they don't, if they give you like when they're being buried, you might be able to kind of do a ballpark figure. You may find out what their age was at the time of death, along with where they were living at the time of death, because I have seen that a lot, where they'll say like John Smith of, Smithville, Fayette County, something like that. So you can at least kind of pinpoint where they might have been when they died and get a death location. Also, you might learn where they were born or where they were from, because I have seen that in certain obituaries as well. As far as, they'll say like, oh, they were born here and then they moved to this location, later in life. You may also find birth dates as well. Sometimes they might provide when that person was born. You might learn names of parents and children and other family members, especially if they have, children and descendants, and grandchildren. You can learn that kind of information. Or if they died, at a certain age, you might learn who their parents were. You might also just learn, the details of the death or other parts of your ancestor's life. You may learn a cause of death. You may learn that they worked at a particular occupation for so many years. I've seen that a lot as well, or a church, or, some kind of community thing that they were a part of. You may learn that kind of stuff as well. And then also just funeral records from certain funeral homes. They might provide you with some sort of information as far as, death records go. A lot of times they'll put the date of death. You might learn the location of the burial potentially, depending on the record and, how thorough and detailed it is. You might also see other names that are written in there that could be family members of the ancestor, if the people that are, paying for the service or that are, witnessing of some sort. And so that can be useful information as well. And also, some of them I've come across will potentially tell you what they did die of. Like if there was some kind of, a pandemic or some kind of mass, sickness or something, it might tell you that they died of, this particular thing. So, you might also learn why or how they died as well. Like for example, these are a couple of pages from a ledger that was I forgot what the funeral home was named, but it's in or is or was in Woodford County, I believe. And it's like the one on the left says that this person died of pneumonia. The one on the right says that they died of dropsy. But it'll also give like the death date. So, if you don't have a death record, you'll at least be like, okay, well, they died on this date and this is why they died and things like that. Okay. All right. So we're basically towards the end here now, and this is my contact information. Once again, my name is Daniel Ware. I'm the genealogy librarian here at the Kentucky Historical Society. My email is daniel.ware@ky.gov, and my office phone is 502-782-8098. And if you have any further questions after today, just please contact me. And that's it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat, and I'll be happy to try to address them. Oh, you're very, very welcome. And I'll send you an email sometime today, hopefully, with the information about the research form and all what you need to do for that. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Like, you mean like specific, like county information? Or what is exactly are you looking for exactly? Those who say, I mean, we've probably got generally what local libraries would have. The only times, like as far as certain things that I would maybe necessarily forward. Oh, okay. Um, I mean, it kind of depends on the library, I would say. Because like my library in my hometown, like we've got like we never had a lot of like genealogy like materials. Like we have like a Kentucky room and like we've got a computer and we've got like a little microfilm reader and we've got some books relating to our county and and just some general genealogy materials. Um, so I mean but I've been to some libraries that have like big like pretty big, like they have a nice big section of their own. So it kind of just depends. Like we've got things on at least pretty much every county, and we've got a lot of like census records and like birth and marriage and death records, and we've got microfilm. um let's see, and like we've got like family histories that people have put together about certain families and surname files. And I don't know necessarily if some libraries would have some of that stuff or not. um, I just know based on my hometown library, it was like the genealogy like stuff was pretty sparse. So I mean, it's kind of hard for me to gauge that because I because it just depends on the library. But because there are some libraries. Right, right, yeah, yeah. But yeah, um, I mean, yeah, we don't have everything. And I mean, I have had to point people to like, especially if it comes to like court records. Like I've actually pointed people to like that local like county courthouse of that belongs to that particular county. And I mean, I have also, depending on what the person's asking, I have also had referred them to like a local county level historical society. Um, so yeah, I mean, we don't have like everything. And usually I know we've had people also at times that they've went to the local place, the local library or whatever, and they've looked there first and then they didn't find what they were looking for. And so then they came here. Um, but yeah, I mean, we don't have like everything. So yeah, it just kind of depends on how that library is set up. Cause like I said, like I've been to like the Kenton County Library, and I mean they're like all about genealogy and stuff up there in northern Kentucky. So they've got like a really exhaustive like big like section like area for genealogy. But then like I said, like my county, which is Spencer County, like we had like a little like room with some stuff that's specific to that county. But like we didn't necessarily have a lot of like censuses. It's just as far as I know, it's just the Kenton County Public Library. It's Kenton. Um, but yeah, like at my like library in Spencer County, like I mean, we had like a couple of like 1850 censuses for I think Spencer County or randomly Jefferson County or somewhere like that, because we did have some surrounding county related material. But then like coming here to KHS, like every county that we've got something for, we've got multiple census records usually for those counties. So some things we have more of, but we don't necessarily have everything. Um, if you join, you would. I believe it's $40, but what you would basically get would be, especially if you made multiple trips here, uh, your admission would be free. So, if you came here frequently, you wouldn't have to pay every time, because right now you would, like, just coming in, multiple times, you'd have to pay the admission every time. You also get, you'd get in, you'd get to do the see the museum, and we've got our old state capitol, and in our Kentucky Military History Museum. There's also, I believe you would have digital access to our archived copies of the Register of the Kentucky Historical Society publication. That I think you have to go through our website for that, but basically that you would be able to have access to that and read those articles and things like that. And so basically between that and like, if you came here like several times a year, like, you would be saving on, the admission fees and things like that. And also, as far as I know, pretty much any of the event stuff, I don't think you would actually pay anything for. Like typically this event is $10 for like non-members, but members are free. So like certain things like that, I think you would get free as well. I'm not sure on other programs and things that I don't have any control over those, but as far as like this one and certain events and things like that. Okay. All right. I guess. Yes, there is a little bit of a time. It does take a little while for them to get put on to, because my coworker, he's the one that does a lot of the stuff with the videos. And so he puts them up on our YouTube channel, which should just be, I think, like Kentucky Historical Society. But there is quite a bit of a wait on getting those up. But yeah, eventually they'll be there. And we do have like our, uh, yeah, but they'll eventually be up on there once he gets that kind of stuff set up. Oh, thank you very much. I hope you are well as well. And I guess I guess if anybody's got any more questions, I can answer them. If not, we'll be finishing up. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes, and thank you, all of you that were here today. I do appreciate you being here. We will, should be the second Saturday of August, should be the next program. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but yeah, it'll be that second Saturday. And we'll try to have some promotional PR stuff out about it, and get, links and stuff sent out beforehand. So. All right. I think we'll stop here. And I do thank you all for being here. You all have a great day.